However you are and whenever you are, welcome, good souls of the planet and beyond to Paranormal Now. I'm Alan B. Smith. Join us as we traverse the cosmic highway of paranormal portholes and tantalizing turnoffs. Joining me tonight is Stephen Bassett, and we have a lot to break down. Last time Stephen was on was 2018, so needless to say, much has taken place in the world of ufology. In government, in the military developments. It's been an exciting 3 years, and Stephen has a lot to say about it tonight, and I have a lot of questions for him as well. So we'll get to Stephen in a little bit. In the last 30 minutes tonight, we will open up the Paranormal Radio app phone lines. So if you'd like to call in, that number is 855-472-5483 or 1-KGRA live. 85-KGRA live. And of course, you can watch us here on YouTube or on Facebook. But if you're not watching, if you just want to tune in and listen in the background as you're doing whatever, you can go to kgradb.com. All right. So it has been very exciting. And I know that we all have a lot of questions tonight. So I'm going to do my best to keep an eye on the comments section. But if I do miss anything, please forgive me. And I know that our producer, Bill Skywatcher, will also do his best to keep an eye on chat on the kgradb.com website. That said, from here, I can only monitor Facebook and YouTube. So if you want to try to catch my eye and get your question in chat, that's the best way to do it. Plus, you can hang out with the virtual community here on YouTube and Facebook. Stephen Bassett is the executive director of Paradigm Research, PRG, founded in 1996. I was 17 years old. To end a government-imposed embargo on the truth behind extraterrestrial-related phenomena. He has spoken to audiences around the world about the implications of disclosure, the formal confirmation by heads of state of an extraterrestrial presence engaging the human race. He has given over 1,200 radio and television interviews, and PRG's advocacy work has been extensively covered by national and international media, including being featured on CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, The Washington Post, and The New York Times. In November of 2014, PRG launched a 2-year political initiatives out of Washington, D.C. that injected the ET issue into the 2016 presidential campaign. PRG recently launched a new exopolitical podcast out of Washington, the DisclosureWire, based in the National Press Building 2 blocks from the White House. Bassett has appeared in many documentary films, and his lectures and interviews are well represented on YouTube. Stephen, welcome to Paranormal Now. How are you?
About as well as it could be expected. Down in downtown Washington, a couple blocks from the White House, about 10 blocks from the Capitol. I can, if I step outside the building, I can see the smoke rising from the Capitol building, and if I look over another direction, I see a sort of a what do you call it? A slow cloud of COVID-19 viruses kind of floating in the air from all the super spreader events going on. And of course, there's military everywhere. In fact, I think there's 3 just off to my left watching me very closely because I'm in a lawn chair here down
clearly
the reflecting pool right in front of the Capitol, and they kind of wonder what the hell is he doing. So it's all funny, it's all exciting. It's a thrilling, interesting time.
Well, I was going to say, wasn't there smoke signals of some sort that drew you there before all this happened? Right? I mean, you went back to Washington. Why was that?
Yeah. I originally set up in Washington area in '96 to pursue the truth end of the truth embargo. I'm a political activist. I'm not a researcher. I don't go out in the woods looking, doing research on cases, citing cases. I bless those who do. Thank God for them. But I'm not. There's snakes out there. They got ticks, all kinds of stuff. I don't do that. I'm a political activist.
I'm pretty sure there's snakes in Washington too.
Yeah, that's a good point. Well made. Look, so. I've been all over the place, but I was out in California for an extended stretch. Then I came back to do the citizen hearing on disclosure. And then I went back to California, and I was parked out there until, well, actually, let me take it back. I did a citizen hearing on disclosure. That went out pretty well. And I took made a copy. A copy was made of all of that testimony, all 30 hours. And then I used that to launch the political initiative during this 2015-16 election campaign. I was pretty sure that Hillary Clinton was going to disclose. That was the plan, been the plan for some time. And so I was able to galvanize a lot of media coverage working with my public relations person here. And we started a cascade of articles that eventually forced literally John Podesta, Hillary Clinton, her husband, and Barack Obama to go on various talk shows like Kimmel and Colbert and what have you, and answer questions about it. This is all planned. It was all.
Well, how did you force it? How did that work?
Well, first you've got to get the press involved. So I was going to the media with a fundamental story about the entire connection between the Clinton political team and the ET issue, which goes all the way back to 93, 4, 5, 6. And we have all the docs on that. It's been covered before, but she's now running for president, and she's the leading candidate. And so they bit down on the story this time. And the initial stories were in the Washington Times. And what happened is as I was actually direct contact with eventually 40 reporters. You call it a source relationship. You're not just sending them an email. You're actually in touch with them, saying, here's what's going on, giving them advanced information for scoops. And some of these reporters were then calling Podesta's office wanting a comment. And so they were in a position where the stories are starting to break in the middle of the campaign. She's running for president, and they want to know about the stuff that was written about her ET connection and Rockefeller Initiative, whatever, in the Washington Times or other venues. Mm-hmm. And that was a tough position for them. So basically, they just didn't respond. They stonewalled them all. They stonewalled all the reporters, meaning they're not even calling them back, which tips any reporter off to the fact that this is something going on. What he chose to do was to say things and do things publicly, which showed the reporters that they were engaging the issue. They weren't going to totally stonewall them, but it would be on their own terms. He put out a famous tweet in February of 2015, went on Kimmel and all this. And all of this was being generated because one story generates more stories, which generates, him turning up in some interview, which generates more stories and so forth. And so we ended up eventually with 400 articles during the campaign about the connection between the leading candidate for president and the issue. The reason I did that was because I knew I was pretty sure she was going to disclose, but I also know that, hey, they can change their mind just like that. Once you're in the White House, it's like, well, I'm president now. That's going to be awkward. It's going to be tough. Why don't we just put that off for a while? And I was going to create such a media coverage that once she went in, the media was going to be all over, even right after the election, thus ensuring she would follow through and end this truth embargo. So that was my last time in Washington. And I had to go back to California. She lost the election, which blew that whole campaign up in the air.
So all of your efforts were invested in
all gone.
Right.
And so I eventually went to the UK and went to Russia. I did an interview in Moscow, things like that. But I really was off the playing field. I was on the bench for some time. And so I'm back in California. And in 2000, 2019. Mm-hmm. Wait, I'm sorry. 2000. Boy, time goes. 2019. By mid-2019, I'm sensing something's going on. And this has to do with the To the Stars Academy. That's a whole nother story. But let me just say something is going on. And I learned that Christopher Mellon and Luis Elizondo had been setting up here meetings, private meetings on the Hill with members of Congress, including committee chairs. Didn't know the names, though a couple did mention that they'd taken briefings, but there were many more than that. And that got my attention. And I'm going, wait a minute, I think I know what that's all about. But still, it wasn't easy for me to just come back to Washington. It was not easy at all. I don't operate from a big cache of cash. So, but then at some point I learned that the president had been briefed, that one or more of the pilots had actually briefed the president about the Nimitz events. I don't think it was anything more than that. I learned that. And we know the president did make a couple of statements. He was asked some questions, very brief responses, nothing consequential. But and yet I realized, wait a minute, this thing is moving a lot further, a lot faster than I thought. In which case, I made the decision to relocate back to Washington, plant my feet, and get ready for what I thought was coming. Ultimately, I ended up, fortunately, getting an office in the National Press Building, was able to set up a studio. And the plan was to launch a podcast called the DisclosureWire, which would address these issues in a podcast, because you have to have a podcast out. If you don't have a podcast, you're nothing. Let's face it. You want to get anybody's attention? No podcast, forget it. Just, retire. So I did that.
I'm putting the link to his, Stephen, I'm putting the link to your podcast in the chat right now.
Yeah, DisclosureWire.org. So that's what brought me back. The podcast, though, was delayed tremendously because the year 2020 ended up being different. Whatever your plans were for 220, I think you can relate to this, guys. They went out the window. So the podcast was delayed for a year, but I was able to hang in and track things very carefully, spending a lot of time following the news and all developments related to the ET issue and disclosure. And now the podcast is launched, and we're in 2021. So that's what brought me back. That's the rough history.
Yes, absolutely. Why were you so invested in the Clinton campaign? Is it just because of their history of asking questions in the 90s, and why not spend some of that energy on the Trump campaign as well, to try to get them to disclose?
Well, first of all, let's talk about the Clinton. You have to understand the Clinton connection to the ET issue is deep and wide. It starts with the Rockefeller Initiative. Now, many of your listeners have no idea what the Rockefeller Initiative is. By the way, everything I'm talking about right here is on my website, paradigmresearchgroup.org. It's all there in depth. So go and hang out there for a while. It's a pretty big site. And Rockefeller wanted him to bring the files out. Lawrence Rockefeller, he made an effort. Basically, the Air Force and DOD told him, forget about it, right? You're just the president, dude. You're just a nobody from Arkansas. Leave us alone, which did not make him happy. It got worse because then, because he kept pressing, the Air Force did, I think, a $20 million study report on the Roswell thing to sort of try to shut it down.
And it didn't work.
And it didn't work. They had to give a press conference before the Roswell anniversary in 1997. Stephen Schiff got stonewalled on the Roswell records by the DO. It was a fiasco. But the point is that the Clintons figured out that, they've got a lot of information about this issue. They're not letting the president know. That is a constitutional violation. Plus, they'd stonewall Carter, Democratic president, so you can be sure that Clinton and his aides knew that Carter had been stonewalled, which sort of gave him a feeling like, I guess, what is it? The Republicans get to know about these things, but Democratic presidents don't? How does that work?
It could just be coincidence.
Yeah. So the initiative, Rockefeller's attempt, and the initiative ended around, as he started his next campaign in 96, it was dropped, basically. It just wasn't going to go anywhere. So he runs for office, and he wins, which makes him now a lame duck president in a sense. Second term, nothing to lose. And I think the military intelligence complex was afraid, very afraid, that he was going to step back into this issue because now he had nothing to lose.
Yeah.
And he was mad. But the scandals never stopped, and they finally got him on Monica Lewinsky, which took him to impeachment. So they basically tied his hands. And so he comes to the end of his term. Gore is his vice president. They're very close. Gore, perfectly placed because of his history to re-engage the ET issue and bring it home and get that legacy, not only for Gore, but for the Democratic Party and by grandfathering in the Clintons. So in other words, there's a huge amount of history at stake here.
Why is Gore so interested? What do we know about him?
He's not interested in the sense that he was aware of the Rockefeller Initiative. He knew the government was stonewalling the Clintons. He was on key Senate committees, I think, including armed forces. He specialized in nuclear arms proliferation and so forth, arms reduction. Mm-hmm. So this is a man more than capable of grasping the implications of the extraterrestrial presence and what it would mean if that were announced to the world by a U.S. president. Well, now, there's nothing specific about that. Sure. I'm making an assumption, but boy, it's a very straightforward assumption that he would have moved on the issue.
Well, the rhetoric then wasn't what it is now, but now there's this constant repeat of security threat. Do you think that's kind of the state of mind he was in, the Clintons were in, or were they concerned about a threat, or is it just curiosity?
Well, Rockefeller said, look, let's release all the files because the Cold War was over and it was time for the truth embargo to end. Mm-hmm. I don't think Clinton had any sense of this issue at all when he arrived in Washington. There's no reason down in Arkansas that he was somehow looking into this issue or getting briefed. Rockefeller brought it to his door.
Yeah.
And of course, the person that carried most of the water here was Podesta, and that's not a coincidence. So the political team, realized, one, the government does have a lot of information on this issue. They will not give it to the president, which is an absolute constitutional violation. And so this information must be pretty profound for the Department of Defense to basically tell the United States president, who is the commander-in-chief and capable of firing all of them, not give them that information. And so they knew it was huge. And then again, once their attention is brought to it, they don't need the CIA to tell them anything. They can just go read the books that are out there. I mean, there's been 70 years of research, 60 years of research. Read Stanton Friedman, whatever. It's easy to conclude and know the ET presence is real. Now, Gore...
You have to put some effort into it, though, to believe it.
Well, they clearly... They spent 3 years engaging the issue during the Rockefeller Initiative. We've got 200 pages of documents about reports that were submitted and studied and so forth. But it was too soon, and Clinton was not going to be allowed to go forward. Gore loses the election in Florida, and the issue completely shuts down because the Republicans have essentially stayed completely out of the ET issue in any meaningful way that we know politically, with the odd remark from, say, Reagan or so forth. And so it goes dead for a while. But Hillary Clinton, when her husband left office and then Bush won the election, was not happy. She was a very angry woman. Her husband had been stonewalled, been deprived of that legacy. They had been run around the track with one scandal after another, some legitimate, some not. And then the Democrats basically had the election essentially stolen in 2000. And so she was going to become president. Absolutely. That everybody knew that. And so she ultimately runs again in 2008. And I brought the issue up to the media then. There's a big connection between the Clinton team and the issue. Look at this, whatever, let's get into it. The plan was the same as I executed in 2016, only I had far less resources and far less gravitas at the time. But before I could get that underway...
Less gravitas in 2008 or 2016?
2008 than 2016. But before I could get anything going, she drops out and Obama wins the nomination. And so that's it. But she gets brought into the administration. Podesta gets brought into the administration. Other people connected to the Rockefeller Initiative, like Leon Panetta, got brought into the administration. And so essentially the whole issue carries forward into the Obama administration with the Clinton people as they come in. Obama gets tipped off by them almost certainly. And now she has to wait 8 years, not only to be president, but to get the legacy that was denied her husband. Namely, getting that information and being able to confirm the ET presence to the American people.
Well, what's your take? And that's my question: is why is it important to have that legacy? Did Clinton? Do you think the Clintons came to believe that this is something that people just needed to know about? That it was important. What's the legacy they're looking for?
Okay. When I say legacy, I'm talking political legacy. Okay. And I'm speaking as somebody that spends a lot of time looking at politics. Now, somebody that cares nothing about politics, they go, whatever. Let me be clear. I've only said this 400,000 times, so I've got it down real good.
Go for it.
The announcement, the confirmation of the extraterrestrial presence engaging the human race on this planet for at least the last 70 years, and I think very likely going back thousands of years, though that was a totally different scenario than we have now. That confirmation will be the largest paradigm shift in human history. It will be the biggest event in human history. It will be the greatest news story in human history. And the president, if a single head of state starts this off, which is what I expect, that confirms that makes the announcement, will get the greatest political legacy in history.
So there's glory. Period. There's glory.
It's not even close. Nothing even comes close.
Right. Okay. All right. So it is about glory. It is about, checking that box and being the one to release that to the people that, so I guess the Lawrence Rockefeller, he brought this idea to the Clintons, and from what you said, the Clintons really didn't have much interest that we know of.
They didn't come into town with that issue on their
agenda.
plate. They didn't probably know much about it. Rockefeller changed all that. He put them in play, whether they wanted it or not. In other words, history arrived at their door on March 29, 1993, when the fax came in to the Office of Science and Technology Policy, to John Gibbons, that Lawrence Rockefeller, friend of the Clintons, major Democratic National Committee donor, a philanthropist, environmentalist, advanced thinker, wanted to meet with the president and provide a report to the president regarding getting the release of all files related to that phenomena from the Department of Defense. Which that, I assure you, was a non-trivial fax.
So he did an amazing job at convincing them that this is a legit phenomena, right? Because you don't just knock on someone's door and say, hey, I want you to look into this, right? You have to, even Lawrence Rockefeller has to convince them.
Let me put it this way. You and I can't knock on the door, but Lawrence Rockefeller comes to the White House and says, this is what I want. You sit down and you listen. Now, I think the initial response, based on what I know, is that Gibbons wanted no part of it. It's like, oh my God, I don't need this, right? But unfortunately, the White House overruled him and they proceeded. Now, they did not know what was going to come of this. They had no idea, right? In other words, history arrived at their door. They went with it, but they could not see the future. But the initiative did go down. And in 2000, Grant Cameron was able to get through FOIA pretty much the entire files from the Office of Science and Technology Policy, confirming it all, which I think was a mistake. I don't think that was supposed to be released, but it kind of just slipped through the cracks. He gave them to me. I took them to the Washington Post, put them up online, and we've been driving that story since 2000. And so the Rockefeller Initiative story was never going to go away. And so then what's going to happen now? Okay. So when Clinton loses, when Clinton leaves office and Gore loses and Trump becomes president, the Clinton team could have said, okay, that's interesting. Hillary's going to be president. Let's focus on getting Hillary president. No problem. They could have done that. Even if there wasn't an extraterrestrial anywhere in this universe but us, they could have done it. But that's not what they did. What happened was only approximately 18 months into Gore's administration, John Podesta, one of the chief advisors to Clinton during the Rockefeller Initiative, the whole 3 years, who then became his chief of staff in the second term, turns up at the National Press Club as part of a press conference announcing a new organization called the Coalition for Freedom of Information, which I had been approached about, maybe to be part of, but my interview did not go well, and that's probably a good thing. I don't think it would have been a good fit for me. And so they announced that this organization is going to be formed to look into this issue and bring it to Washington, D.C., to do what I've been trying to do, but instead with a Clinton team-connected public relations firm, Podesta Mattoon, with a partner was John Podesta's, cousin, brother, whatever, basically a Democrat-leaning K Street law firm, right? And others, individuals, pretty much part of the Democratic world. It was going to be research directed by Leslie Kean. And he, while not a member of the Coalition for Information, walks into the room, gets in front of the podium, right in front of me, and opens his statements with the now famous, you can easily find it on the internet, statement that I believe it's time to release the files about UFOs, et cetera, because people have the right to know, and it's the law. This was filmed. There is a clip of him saying this all over the internet. It's on my website. It's a moment, it's a historical moment. My jaw hit the floor. And I realized in that moment that the Clinton team was not going to let this go. Now, that press conference was held. The Coalition for Freedom of Information was launched. About a month after that is when Steven Spielberg's 10-part, 20-hour miniseries about abduction called Taken was released, including a premiere in Washington at the Reagan Building, which I attended, with waiters walking around with white gloves and silver trays giving out fantastic hors d'oeuvres. Okay. Spielberg, by the way, is very left of center. All right. He's not a Republican guy. He's a Democratic guy. There's something huge going on here. That series was groundbreaking. It was major. And so a year goes by. The Coalition for Freedom of Information gives a second press conference to talk about how they have sued the NASA over files that they wanted to get and NASA wouldn't release. Oh, and Podesta comes to that press conference in a bigger room at the press club with even more cameras and reporters and repeats the same thing and says it's time to get the UFO files out. Unfortunately, we cannot find video of that. It's probably in CNN's vaults, but typically they charge $10,000 to even get a clip like that. But it exists, and eventually it'll turn up. This is 2003. Podesta goes on to make other statements, to collaborate with Leslie Kean on her book, do a foreword. She was in a documentary. Podesta kept the connection between the Clinton political team and their aspirations and the ET issue alive from 2002 all the way to 2007 when she starts to run for election. They kind of calm down at that point. She runs. She doesn't make it. Obama wins. But then the Clinton people are brought into the Obama administration. And so the disclosure advocacy movement continued. We had our successes. Mm-hmm. There were conferences and so forth. And then it began to be clear to me that she not only was going to win, but she was going to claim the legacy that was denied her husband and be not only the first woman president, but the disclosure president, which would put her down in history and give her enormous political power to exercise during her 8 years. She served 8 years.
Well, you're right. That would give anyone enormous political power. Absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah. No. Absolutely. They put a monument on the mall for her. So that was what was at stake in the 2016 election. And I did everything that I could. I put everything I had into it. I truly had it nailed down, and then it all blew up.
You truly believe that? You don't think that there's any chance they would have just sort of rolled over and gone along with things as they are, and just to keep the peace and stay in office?
If I hadn't held the mock congressional hearing at the National Press Club with 42 witnesses, 6 former members of Congress, if I hadn't generated, significantly responsible for generating 400 mainstream news articles all about the ET connection to the Clintons, including New York Times, Washington Post, Washington Times, you name it, right? Mm-hmm. If I hadn't forced them to go on Jimmy Kimmel and Colbert and so forth and actually ask questions about it, it's possible that she would have gone in and picked her own spot when to make that move. Mm-hmm. Could have dragged it on for 2 or 3 years. Who knows? But that's the role of the activist is to get the government or the political person to do something they may not want to do. Mm-hmm. And one way you do that is you close out their back door. You prevent them from backing up. And so all of those articles, all of the statements they made, mm-hmm. And all the reporters that were ready to roll, I assure you, I knew that once she won that election, they were going to be all over the Clinton transition team. And of course, the Clinton team would have said, look, we can't talk about that now. It's not appropriate. We have to prepare for the new government. No problem with that. But then when she takes the White House on January 20, 2017, they're again coming back and they're saying, what's going on? Why did you do this? Why did you say that? What about the Rockefeller Initiative, leaving her no exit? She would have to go and do what she wanted to do anyway, but not put it off. That's how activists work. Activists put the southern states in a position where they had nowhere to go but to simply end segregation or the government to pass the civil rights bill. That is the way activists work, and that's what I am. Now, the same thing applied, right, when she the same thing applies now 4 years later as we approach the next administration.
Well, let's step back a bit first. Yeah. So one, you're saying that there was possibly a connection between Clinton and Spielberg, an influence, if you will.
I'm simply saying that Spielberg the Coalition for Freedom of Information just happened to be launched in Washington, D.C. a month before the premiere of that massive 20-hour miniseries on abduction, not just UAPs, abduction, and that Spielberg has connections. Now, was there any specific connection? I don't know. But to somebody like me, I see these things happening, and I see something going on here. I don't know all the details, but in terms of the disclosure process, the series taken and the launch of the Coalition for Freedom of Information, and Podesta going in front of the cameras and specifically saying, it's time to release all the files because the people have a right to know, and it's the law.
But is that when he says files, is that just, we watch the X-Files, right? And so we say release the files. It's just a general term. It's not necessarily something specific. Do you think he knows of like a specific documentation? Like, what do you think he's referring to when he says that?
I think, after all this time, I think Podesta has been tipped off and given information about the kinds of things that are in the government's hands. I don't think he has access to USAPs. But again, you can get a pretty good idea what the government has simply by reading the literature in the citizen science world. Yeah. A lot of work has been done. You don't have to get it from the CIA. It's in the friggin' library. It's in documentaries all over the internet. But whatever. Okay, UFO files means it's time to tell the public what you know. Does it necessarily mean it's time to drag a crashed saucer wreckage out and put it on display at the Smithsonian? No. But it means it's time to release the information, or a great deal of the information that you have about this issue. Now, eventually, a lot of that information started to get released, and that's thanks to a lot more work that was done after Obama took president until the present. I mean, the activist movement has never stopped. It has been relentless, and ultimately, it is succeeding.
Well, that's what I want to ask you, too. So you have members of the Clinton administration now including Hillary, the Obama administration. So they may have continued that agenda. And then recently, was it 3 months ago, Obama had an interview with Stephen Colbert. And
he had another one. I know he had one back in 2016. Did he have another one and talk about ETs with Colbert recently?
Yes. Everyone listening, you can fact check me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty darn sure because Lee Spiegel and I were talking about that as well. And what Obama said this past year, Colbert asked him about the ET issue, right? And whether we know about the existence of extraterrestrials. And of course, normally Clinton or whomever does the runaround. They talk around the issue. They don't answer straight.
Yeah.
And Colbert, didn't back down on that. And he said, well, so I wish I had the exact words in my mind, but it was along the lines of his silence was basically an admission, because he refused to say no,
sure,
there are not extraterrestrials. No, there are not UFOs and X-Files. Yeah. And he kept pressing. He pressed him, and he wouldn't answer. So that, I think, is probably one of the most exciting interviews I had seen, and lasted that exchange maybe 45 seconds.
There's more exciting out there than that. I need to find that clip. I'll look for that clip and get it up on my site. It's important. He's doing something that is happening all over the country right now. People have figured out that we are probably in the last weeks and months of the truth embargo, and disclosure is coming. And so they're doing a little something here, a little something there. The play is about to start, and people are moving toward the stage. They're climbing up on the stage. They're in the back trying to get through the back door of the stage to get them, because things are about to break. Obama would know that as well as anyone. And so that brings us to this last 4 years, right? And what has led up to this interview tonight is that the Clinton's opportunity to be the disclosure president was gone. And we had a new president and a very new political situation. I was bereft. I went into deep depression. And ultimately, I went to London, where I have a supporter, and was able to stay for 7 months or so just to get away from it all, which is unfortunate. And I'll tell you why in a minute. But I did get to go to Moscow and do an interview there that was kind of a historical interview, though not that many people know about it. Mm-hmm. But there was not much I could do. But what I learned while I was in London is that while I was doing not long after I finished the citizen hearing on disclosure, which may or may not have had influence on what came next. I don't know. But not long, but even less long after, I approached Washington with the political initiative, which began when I shipped 538 sets of the record of the citizen hearing on disclosure, 10 DVD sets to every member of Congress, House and Senate. And we hit Washington with about 2.5 million tweets of the media and members of Congress, just driving them crazy with tweets about the fact that something's breaking. You're getting this. You get pay attention. # disclosure. About 2.5 million of these things. I probably didn't make any friends with that. Not long after that, something else started happening, and I didn't know about it behind the scenes. And I didn't actually learn the particulars until 2017, though I knew eventually that something important was going down by 2016, November 2016. Mm-hmm. And what was happening was that within the Pentagon, primarily within the Pentagon, I believe, a group of individuals had been paying attention all these years to everything that we've been doing out in the public sector, paying attention to the Clinton ET issue, the ET connection, rather, Podesta statements, documentaries, the whole movement that we have. They were aware of it. And they also were aware of things as members of the Pentagon, meaning you don't have to be in the heart of the ET issue within the government to know things, to get tipped off. They had come to the conclusion it was time to end the truth embargo, and that they wanted to help. They wanted to be part of that for a number of reasons. One, I think it was because of the right thing. Two, because if disclosure were to take place, the Pentagon, the military intelligence complex, was in a really tough position. Public relations-wise, historically, was in a really tough position because the military intelligence complex is the entity that managed the truth embargo and maintained the lie for 70 years. And once the lie was exposed, guess who was going to take the heat? Guess who was going to get all the anger of the American people? Guess who the press were going to bother and badger every day? And they weren't thrilled about this because they felt they were doing the best they could and they were protecting the country. They decided to do something, but it was extremely difficult because they couldn't do anything directly from within the DOD. This would be, well, not treason, but totally illegal. Yeah. They answer to the president. They can't unilaterally do something along those lines, massive policy thing like that. They can't surreptitiously go to the New York Times with info. I mean, it could. It occasionally happens, but it's career ending, and the DOD would probably never recover from the stain. Mm-hmm. So what they decided to do was to create a surrogate organization made up of people who formerly worked for the military intelligence complex, high-end people with long careers and high classification status and so forth. And this was somehow coming together, kind of being tossed around, I think as early as 2015, maybe early 15, maybe mid 15. And as it happened, simultaneous with that, a musician by the name of Tom DeLonge, with a lifelong interest in the ET issue, an intense interest, who had been involved in with some of my colleagues back in the 90s.
And wrote a song about UFOs. Yep.
And but primarily was out selling records. He made a lot of money selling records, 30 million records. But sometime around that period, 2015, he got real serious about getting back into the issue. Now, he had the money to fly around the country to anything that was going on. If there was some sort of meeting that the public could go to, he could fly and go to it. Right. If there was some sort of reception before the meeting, he could go to that. And he was flying around, going to these events and buttonholing people of rank and station that he might know about, and trying to get them to meet with him or introduce him to other people that would meet with him because he had some strong ideas about how to address this issue. And by and large, I think he just got brushed aside. But that's you would expect that. But he
was coming at it from a different approach, which was a good idea. It was novel.
It was not just a good idea. I think it was similar to the idea that they had. It was along the same lines that they were already thinking. And so he just walked right into history. And so one day they said, let's meet. And he admitted, like in his interview with George Knapp, he was shocked. We're going to meet. You're going to go meet this guy. So what was the idea that he had? It was this. And I'm paraphrasing here. I'm sure Tom will disagree with some of this language, but I think I've got it. That the military intelligence complex were the good guys. They have protected the country and the West from the Soviet threat and the nuclear arms race and the potential of nuclear war since 1947. They're not the bad guys, all right? Though they're certainly viewed that way by lots of people, including people interested in the UAP issue. And that they were going to take a huge amount of grief at some point when this issue finally breaks into the open. And keep in mind, there are other heads of state that could end the truth embargo tomorrow. And they're not going to get any slack for that, meaning, oh man, Putin just, told you the truth, but we weren't going to tell you the truth, so don't get on our case. We wanted to keep it going. We wanted the lie to keep, no, that's not going to work. And so they had a problem. And he said, look, what you want to do is let's form an entity to get information out to the public.
Sure.
In books and documentaries and what have you, and also do research that will show that you're trying to be helpful. You're trying to be part of the solution, right? That's what you need to do. Now, I don't know if he knew exactly what kind of entity he wanted, but I think he probably was thinking an external entity, not a DoD-based program. And I think that's what they wanted. But they had a problem. If we were to form an entity like that, who is going to run it? Who's going to front it? Who's going to be the CEO? Because if they formed what ultimately became the To the Stars Academy, and Luis Elizondo was the CEO, with a 30-year career of on-the-ground, high-level intel operations, black projects, right? I'm not saying this is bad. I'm simply saying that's his background. And he shows up as the head of the To the Stars Academy. They would have been just buried in cynicism and criticism. It would have looked really, really suspicious. What in the hell are you trying to pull now? Instead, they launched that organization with a 40-year-old, very popular rock star, right, with no background at the CIA, no classified status, who just wanted to help inform the public. It was brilliant, and it worked. Okay, so all that was sort of coming together in late 2015. I knew nothing about it. The first I knew about it was in March of 2016 when an arranged interview by George Knapp, who is a key interface between this issue and mainstream journalism, one of the most important people in the field, gave him a 4-hour interview on Coast to Coast AM Sunday night program. And that I'm going to be talking about, by the way, my podcast over the next months is going to be all over this stuff. I'm going to be going over it and over it. And I'm going to have video and audio, all kinds of stuff. But yeah, I'm giving you a little preface here, a little trailer. Mm-hmm. George went to great lengths to say, this is a big interview. This is really big stuff. This is a big deal. And George is not prone to too much exaggeration. And then Tom comes on and off they go. Mm-hmm. And I'm listening to Tom talk about how he was trying to meet with people. And one day they agreed to meet. And then he got interviewed to somebody else and then met somebody else. And he's talking to somebody at the CIA and then somebody at NASA. And they're talking about doing this and doing that. And it's a really big deal. He can't go into too much detail. I think he actually went too far, frankly. I don't think he was supposed to say that much. And I'm trying to grasp, I'm trying to grok it. Right? I'm showing how old I am. I was trying to grok this 40-year-old rock star, mm-hmm. who I think has been naked on stage a couple of times, maybe not, but whatever. He's a wild and crazy guy, is meeting with the top people in the CIA and the DoD about this issue, and they're going to do something together. And I'm going, this is not. Whatever. But he talked about the fact that one of the very first things they were going to do was, as part of their entertainment goals, is to put out some books, fiction books, which are sort of nonfiction. Nonfiction is fiction.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
And it was going to be a series called Secret Machines. And I'm going, okay. 30 days later, Secret Machines was published and announced. And at that moment, I knew something is going on here. But then he went quiet and we didn't hear anything. And it's March. Now I'm totally buried in the campaign and I'm just focusing on that and everything that's going down, very intense. And I'm just not thinking about it. And then 15 days before the election, another event, WikiLeaks dumped the Podesta files.
Mm-hmm.
Obtained, I believe, by Russian operatives who then gave them to WikiLeaks, and then WikiLeaks dumped them. It was the biggest mistake that Assange ever made, and is one of the reasons why he's been through hell these last years. He didn't just get the files and put them out, which is what he usually does.
Right.
I got them. I put them out for the public to see. He hates Clinton. Right? He said it. Everybody knows it. She hates him. And so he made the decision to go hyper-political.
Right.
So instead of just putting them out, he put them out one day at a time, 5,000 at a time, to guarantee a huge news story stretching over the virtually the last 15, 16 days of the campaign. Maximum impact on the campaign, deliberately done to prevent her from being president. And he was asked about that. He was asked, why are you doing it this way? And he came back with this lame answer, which, well, my job, WikiLeaks' job, is to get this stuff seen by as many people as possible. And by doing it 5,000 a day, day after day after day, it got more attention. Just happened to be the final days leading into the election of somebody he hated.
Right, but the question then is, was that a past pattern of his, or is this a new way?
It was new, absolutely.
New.
Normally, they put stuff out. They put it all out in one shot. And for the people to go through and for the journalists to review. In other words, it was news. It was journalism. What you make of it, what you make of it. All right. Now he's opposed to a lot of the things that some of these entities were doing, some of the banks and other things that he's outed, but it was not. This was different. And by the way, this was really political. When he puts out the Iraq files through Chelsea Manning, that wasn't so much political. It was anti-war, right? It's really pretty much anti-war. Yeah. And it was just done. They had them and they put them out. This was done in a special way just before the election. Okay, so whatever. In those files are all these emails relating to Tom DeLonge. And they're all on my I have them all on my blog, on my website. Mm-hmm. I've not only got the links to all of the emails, I've got commentary about the ones involving ETs. Of the 90-some ET UAP related emails in Podesta's files that WikiLeaks dumped, 52 of them involved Tom DeLonge. And what we learned is that there was something going on between he and Podesta. He was interviewing him. He was talking to him. He introduced him to some of the people that he was, quote, dealing with inside.
Sure.
Yeah,
but is that surprising?
What do you mean it's surprising?
It's not surprising, right? I mean, he was interested in the subject. He was working towards his goal of disclosure. So it seems like Podesta is a natural person to reach out to, and if you're a celebrity, you might have that access.
True. Was I surprised? No, but again, it's not that he was just reaching out to him because he remember at the time he's reaching out to him, Podesta is the chairman of Hillary Clinton's campaign. He's not just anybody. He's a busy guy. So why is he reaching out to him then? Well, it's because of what they had planned. And Podesta, of course, was somebody they needed to get in touch with. They were basically giving him a heads up of what's going on. They were introducing the people, probably letting him know a little about what's happening, and introducing, and also he interviewed to get a documentary interview with him and what have you. Pretty much harmless, but absolutely not intended for public consumption. Absolutely not. And so when those came out, I realized whatever was going on was even bigger than I thought. And also, be surprised, they didn't approach anybody in the Republican campaign, just the Democratic campaign.
Well, I think there was also an assumption that they were going to win, though, don't you think?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That's the reason that it all happened. I believe, and until I am corrected otherwise, that the principal reason that the group within the Pentagon was prepared to put their reputations and their careers on the line to support this NGO, this non-governmental, what amount to surrogate operation that could bring important information and news to the New York Times, including gun camera footage that they could not possibly do themselves because they're working for the Pentagon and other agencies, came together because they concluded what I had concluded. One, Hillary Clinton was a lock to win that election.
Yep.
I remember it vividly. A lock.
I mean, a lock is. I mean, that's pretty a subjective term.
And look, I'm talking about the pros in Washington, D.C., the inside pollsters.
They had no doubt
she was going to win, 90% chance going to win. And so they knew she was going to disclose. Now, all the articles at the time they're thinking about this. These articles that I've been, driving into the media are appearing all over the place in Washington Post and Washington Times, New York Times. They're seeing the articles about it, and then they're seeing her make statements like to the Conway Daily Sun, to Damon Steer, that, if I'm elected, I'm going to get the files out. I may even open up a study in Area 51. And that generated a bunch of, they're seeing all this happening, and they're going, she's going to disclose. And if she does, we are going to be holding the bag.
All right, well, let's hold it right there, Steve, because we're at the top here. We've got to switch over to break, our only break tonight, y'all, so don't worry. We've got plenty of time with Steve for the rest of the night. If you want to call in the Paranormal Radio app in the last half hour of the show, you can do that by calling 1-855-472-5483. And, well, we know what happened to Hillary, and we'll talk a little bit more about the Trump administration leading up until today. Alan B. Smith for Paranormal Now on KGRA Radio. We'll be right back.
That we die, roll the die as you hide. I can't find you on the other side of the line.
Mainstream media's most wanted. KGRARadio.com.
On and again, the signs keep on coming, they point to the end, but I hold on so tight.
Welcome back to Paranormal Now. This is Alan B. Smith, your grateful host. Taking us out of the break was music by Septembrio. If you want to find out more about Septembrio, go to septembrio.com. My special guest tonight is Stephen Bassett, and we'll speak to him in just a moment from now. As a friendly reminder, you can call the Paranormal Radio app lines in the last 30 minutes. Those numbers are 855-472-5483 or 85-KGRA Live. And a friendly reminder, if you want to find out the best weekly paranormal and ufological news, sign up for the Telepath. Just go to kgradb.com and join the newsletter so you can keep up with what's hottest in the news. So, Stephen, what is it like? I know it's been a different year, but what's it like for you to be back in Washington?
Well, I got back in September of 2019 and got sort of settled in. Mm-hmm. And then my gallbladder decided that it had had enough of this world and needed to move on to a better place.
Oh,
and so I went through about 2 months of great unpleasantness and finally ended up in a surgery room on New Year's Eve when my gallbladder departed. And then I had to deal with the aftermath of that and so forth. And I had to go back out to California. Then I came back, ultimately came back on the 22nd of March for one more procedure. But at that point, the pandemic was underway.
So just
one. So I went into isolation, and I've been in isolation now for 10 months, determined not to get this virus.
How are you holding up with that? Everybody psychologically handles this a little bit differently. How are you doing?
Look, my situation is better than many people. I can't complain.
Sure, me too. Yeah.
I've got a studio and I've got all the tech I could want. I was able to put together the podcast and so forth. So I mean, and I'm good. But I got to tell you, I've spent way too much time the last 12 months thinking about my life.
Too much self-reflection.
Yeah. Look, self-reflection is way overrated. Right.
That's why meditation is about, clearing your mind and not thinking too much about yourself.
Yeah, and I'm going back to all the things I screwed up on and all the ways that I did, and so I've had my psychological ups and downs, but now things are really happening, and I'm really starting to feel back in the game, and extremely excited about this year, and I'm probably going to have my vaccine shot pretty soon. So, what can I say? It's a year of testing. It's also a huge year of learning. A lot of things are going to come out of this year, 2020, which may prove to be more beneficial than we think. But whatever. Okay, so it's 2021 now. Let's party.
Well, I'm glad you're feeling well, at least health wise. It's still tough though. We get to go outside, my wife and I, and walk around, but with a mask on, it's not pleasant. So I tend to just spend more time indoors. We're in a city anyway, and I don't like it necessarily, but I'm more comfortable not wearing my mask and being indoors than wearing my mask and being outdoors, which is kind of a bummer because those who live in more rural areas don't have to worry about that. They can sit on their front porch and have a backyard. Is it the same where you are? Is it more city-like?
I'm in downtown Washington.
Yeah, downtown. Okay.
And I have no problem with the mask. I wear them all the time, except when I'm in my office. I also wear a shield whenever I go anywhere, except just walking outside. I have a shield. I have an Insta Shield. It works with a baseball cap. It's fantastic. INSTA Shield, one word, $3. Use it all the time. Reuse it. Wash it. So I'm not fooling around with this thing.
Sure. Yeah.
So
let's go back to the beginning here of the Trump years. We've had the Space Force, which has been a new development in our, not just in our military, but I think in our public awareness of space. I think the fact that there's an actual Space Force is forcing a lot of people to think differently, more off-world like, and because NASA, it's kind of lost. It's not for me, of course, or you, but for plenty of other people, it's not on our radar. They're not paying attention to it, and it seems like the Space Force kind of got the conversation going again. So developments that occurred over the Trump years, what's your take on that?
Not much. I call it the space farce. That's what it is. Really? It's a farce. It's not important. It's almost irrelevant. But we were on a very important point for the break. Let me close that point.
Yeah.
One of the things that I hope to learn one day is if all of the articles that were being generated, all the press coverage of the ET connection to the Clintons, as well as their statements in media and on shows, played a role in the people inside the Department of Defense as to whether to go or no go on that project. In other words, do we move forward or not move forward? Because if Clinton wasn't going to disclose, they might be premature, right? There was a risk to this program. I assure you, there was plenty of risk to what they did. But everything that was going down seemed to confirm absolutely she's going to disclose. So they decided to go forward, but then it blew up. It blew up. And I still didn't know about it. So I'm in London when the program finally is launched. They waited 10 months and they launched the To the Stars Academy of Arts and Sciences. We refer to it as the To the Stars Academy. That's more than enough for me. And that changed everything. That was the turning point, ultimately, the final turning point in the disclosure advocacy movement. We crossed the Rubicon and there's no going back. And because of the To the Stars Academy's launch and what they did subsequently, we are now in the final weeks and months of the truth embargo, which I believe is going to end very soon. It was an extraordinary thing. It will go down in history, and I can spend hours talking about it.
Well, I was going to say, if you had to do a rap, an elevator rap, for why that was so important, how would you boil that down? Why is this crossing of the Rubicon different than other past developments?
Well, first, when the To the Stars Academy was launched and people got to the website, saw all the people involved, right? The people that matter, political operatives, journalists, myself, and others. A lot of people, I say matter, people that are particularly knowledgeable, realized that this was generated from within the DoD, and that apparently the Department of Defense and maybe elements of the military intelligence complex had decided to get on the side of the disclosure movement. This is huge. This has never happened before, I assure you. And this was out in the open. Then they could have just launched the thing and maybe tried to raise some money and get an office and order in pizza. Instead, they went directly to the New York Times with major news stories. So they're launched on October 11th, and the news stories appear in the New York Times 2 months later, December 16th. And what were these news stories? They announced that there had been this project within the Pentagon researching the phenomena called ATIP, that the Senate Majority Leader had instigated it, had asked for it to help raise the money, that a billionaire, Robert Bigelow, was involved in some of the research. And by the way,
he's been
we
around.
have some gun camera footage here for you in the New York Times about intercepts of UAPs by F-18s in 2004, 2014, doing thousands of miles an hour and so forth. The New York Times vetted all of this and wrote 2 stories, front page below the fold. Leslie Kane was lead, Ralph Blumenthal, and then I think Darlene Cooper. There was a staff writer. These are historical stories. They will be talked about for centuries. Those 2 stories blew the issue wide open. All right. So you might say, well, if it blew the issue wide open, then why didn't the media just completely converge and this whole thing finally gets done and we get the truth?
Right.
Because the reason they waited 10 months to launch and may not have launched at all is because at the same time this extraordinary historical thing is happening regarding UAPs, another historical event is happening. The new administration proved to be unlike anything we'd ever seen before, creating a degree of chaos we'd never seen before, at least not in the modern era. I don't know about the early 1800s. Who the hell knows?
But when you say chaos, does that affect, do you mean behind the scenes, the political, governmental, military?
Everything. Absolutely everything. There is no aspect of the operations of the United States government, politically, militarily, scientifically, you name it, that wasn't disrupted by this administration. Now, understand, that was kind of a hook that was used in the campaigns, that the new president was going to be a disruptor, kind of like in Silicon Valley, we got the tech companies come along with disruptive technology, and they got what they wanted. They got a disruptor. Only they got at a level of disruption that maybe they weren't counting on. All right. And so this project ultimately leading to or trying to bring about disclosure of the extraterrestrial issue, which is an extremely difficult, complicated thing to pull off, which is why it hadn't happened in 70 years, was going to be virtually impossible under the administration, the current administration. It was the political situation was beyond bad, right? In terms of getting cooperation, bipartisan hearings, and things like that. No, the only thing that kept the Republicans and the Democrats from shooting each other on the Senate and House floors was the prospect of going to prison. Otherwise, they'd have done it. So it was a disaster, a mess. Okay, so they couldn't do it, but they still launched because I think ultimately they realized they couldn't just hang out and just wait. So they launched. And then they slow walked their efforts. Their agenda was slow walked over the next few months, years. I won't go into the details there, but the point is that you slow walk it and wait to see what happens in 2021. Mm-hmm. What will be the political situation in 2021? As 2020 moved forward, they began to realize kind of how things were probably going to work out, and they started to pick up the pace.
So it was calculated.
Oh, this is all calculated. Oh my God, yes.
And so, I mean, Luis Elizondo, Chris Mellon, and I think it was December, they already started alluding to separating from To the Stars Academy and moving into another phase, I believe is the word he used.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what you're talking about.
Well, no, I'm talking about so much else.
Oh, okay.
There has been months and months of one thing after another. There are developments and events happening so fast I can't keep up with them.
Okay.
And they all come under the heading of this.
Yeah.
The disclosure train, which we've been warming up and stocking with provisions for 70 years now, is getting ready to leave the station. And so if you want to be on that train, if you want to be part of what will be the most profound event in human history, you've got to start getting on it now. And you're seeing that happening all around the world. Scientists, academics, politicians, they're all doing things that we hadn't seen before. And it's all because they have figured out, the train's about to leave and I need to get on. My job is, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, any chance you can get to Neil deGrasse Tyson?
Nah, waste of time. Neil's not on board yet.
Okay.
He will be on board eventually. He's not a fool. But he's not, I'm afraid that he has made a lot of statements which he will deeply regret and may prevent him from having a role that he'd like to have. But in any event, so all of these things are happening one after another after another. Okay, so what's going on? Here is, again, I'm giving little bits and pieces of a huge story, folks. So don't, if you're having trouble following it, I'm sorry. I don't have enough time.
No,
here's what's happening.
We're good.
The aim, I believe, of the TTSA, or at least the people behind it, was disclosure. That's why they did it. It wasn't just so they could have an organization or research propulsion systems, because they're already researching propulsion systems in black programs. They don't need another program for that on the outside. Is to get disclosure. The proper way to get disclosure is and always has been through congressional hearings. The way it has to come about is that we would have not the one-day hearing with 4 on-site witnesses that we had in 1968, which was essentially a front. It was a cover, legitimate hearing, but it wasn't. They had no intention of going anywhere with it. No, I'm talking multiple hearings, multiple committees, armed services, intel, and so forth, almost certainly with primarily military witnesses. They go on for weeks, actually, and will be watched by hundreds of millions of people. These hearings, when they happen, will probably have the largest viewership of any program in the history of television. Hundreds of millions, maybe 1 billion. So you have those hearings. The testimony comes forward under oath now. In my mock congressional hearing, the citizen hearing, it was under oath, but it was under mock oth, right? And this would be the real deal.
Right, but it helps set the stage.
And so all the American people, the world's people, are seeing this extraordinary testimony coming from military witnesses about this phenomena under oath. And in due course, the president, DOD officials, and congressional leaders could then meet separately and arrive at appropriate conclusion that that testimony clearly shows that this phenomena is non-human. It is extraterrestrial in origin. And it's pretty obvious to me and you, and it's obvious, I think, to most of the American people. I think it's appropriate now for the president to now confirm it. So the president goes in front of the American people and confirms that, yes, this evidence points to an extraterrestrial presence, and that is confirmed by me today, and we have a lot more to say about it. Everybody wins in this scenario.
You're talking about 2021 or what?
I'm talking about early this year.
Okay.
Everybody wins. The Congress wins. They're involved. All the committee chairs, the committee members, both parties. The Congress gets a piece of the legacy. The DOD wins because it's going to be providing witnesses and information and being part of and seen as part of the truth process, which, of course, the TTSA was already getting underway when it launched in October 2017. The president wins because the president is doing it in a way that doesn't really create a political problem for him.
So you think Biden is okay with this?
Absolutely. Biden has been part of the Clinton political team forever. Right? When I say the political team of the Clinton political team, I'm including Hillary, Bill, John Podesta, Barack Obama, Joe Biden, Leon Panetta, Bill Richardson, and a few others. They're all part of a team, some of which are more out in front of some not. They have all been aware of this all along. Hillary, of course, has been the key figure because Hillary was going to be the president, right? Of all the political team, only Hillary was going to be the president. No, Bill Richardson ran, but it wasn't even close. But the point, and he was part of the political team. So where are we now? Hearings is the way it had to go. So, not surprisingly, what did the TTSD ultimately, what's the most important things they did besides the major release of information in the New York Times? They did a show on History Channel, 14 episodes, 2 seasons, in which they brought the issue out again, and they brought lots of military witnesses on camera, a few in silhouette. Some were the ones we knew about with the Nimitz event, and others, one military witness after another, on camera talking about this issue, no consequence. They were doing that. And what happened because of that? They started getting contacts from all around the country from military witnesses, people that have had experiences like the ones in that show, but had never talked about it, were willing to talk about it because they had lowered the barrier. They had kind of shown, look, things are moving forward. David Fravor is not being bothered. He's not going to take any hits. The Pentagon's not going to give him a hard time. It's a new game, folks. It's a new time, a new era. It's okay. And so they were coming forward, and they've been collecting these witnesses for months and months. Meanwhile, Chris Mellon, the political operative, has all the right background, was arranging and holding the hearings on hearings, but the briefings on the Hill with committee chairs like Rubio and Mark Warner and others. How many we don't know, but apparently quite a few. Bringing witnesses along with him. Usually, I think the pilots, but who knows what other witnesses are there. All off the record, not for public consumption, just a FYI. All right. So he's seeding the Congress with the agenda and the intention and letting them know what to expect. That was going on for quite some time. And the president did get a briefing as well. Didn't surprise me. Didn't matter whether they wanted to or not. The point is that they were briefing Republican members of Congress who are then going to go to the White House staff and say, look, I just got this briefing with these pilots. I think the president should too. And so the president got that briefing. Yeah. He chose not to take action on it, but he got the briefing. And of course, this is what brought me back to Washington. And so, okay, he's doing that. And so what does that say? It's simple. They intend and are preparing for and setting the stage for congressional hearings this year, right away, not down the line. They have the witnesses ready to go. They have committee chairs ready to act. If the political situation is stable enough, if it's conducive enough, then there is no reason for them not to go forward. And it turns out that the ultimate outcome of this election produced about the most stable situation we could expect. Why? New president, different party, new president. The Democrats took the Senate. Why is that important? Not speaking partisanly so much, but because the Democrats control both the House and the Senate, they control all of the committee chairs. And so it reduces the likelihood that you'll get some hearings going, say, in the House on the ET issue, but the Senate goes, we want nothing to do with that. We're not going to hold any hearings on that. No. We don't believe in that nonsense. Not likely. Now you can almost be certain that the hearings will be both in House and Senate.
But I'm sure there are plenty of Democrats that don't want that, label on them either, with their constituency.
I can assure you that there's a lot of things that Democrats have to worry about in terms of labeling. This isn't really one of them. And the process is moving forward. So whatever objections may exist among certain members, it doesn't matter. But, even going forward, this is it. Yeah. This is the end game.
Even if Trump, got what he did, he got briefings from these pilots, that if he's not given the evidence, the truth from, I don't know, let's say a special access program, whoever the gatekeepers are, then he's in no different of a place than you and I are, right? I mean,
Or you said Trump. Did you mean Biden?
No, Trump.
No, Trump wasn't given briefings like that, and he was in no position to advance this issue. He did advance this issue, and it's ancient history. Let's talk about now. Now, let's something else, by the way. Remember, I mentioned the fact that they were meeting with members of committees on the Hill privately. They were gathering witnesses, and something else happened. Rubio and Warner were briefed by Mellon. and whoever else he brought with him. Rubio, I believe it was Rubio, not Warner, but Rubio decided to take some action. And so he put some language in the Defense Intelligence Appropriation Bill, which of course you know about, a very interesting language, very cleverly done, stating that the Intel Committee has been hearing a lot about the UAP issue, and it really wants a full report from the ONI, the Office of Naval Intelligence, and other agencies about what they're doing about it and what information they have, et cetera, and that they want that delivered to the Intel Committee 180 days after the bill gets signed. Smart. One, Rubio was not up for election, so he's politically safe.
It is smart. But Steve, I'm sorry, I'm just going to go back just a little bit. Yeah. So in your opinion, and we'll leave this behind, in your opinion, do you think that Trump had any intention that he would have liked to release this information, and why not?
He was not involved in the issue. He was not going to deal with the issue. We have far too many problems to develop. The Department of Defense wouldn't have cooperated with him. It wasn't going to happen.
Okay, and I have a question for you from Ryan Sprague from Somewhere in the Skies, author and podcast. He says, what does Stephen think of the fact that there is actually no funding for the UAP task force that you're just speaking of?
Doesn't matter. The UAP task force was set up mostly for show. In other words, there's this whole bunch of things that are happening. I mean, I could list them all. It would take a while, in which the Navy, the Army, members of Congress, scientists, and so forth are doing things not so much in a highly substantive way, but in a public relations way, meaning the train's leaving the station. I got to get on board this train. And so the ATIP program was outed. Okay, fine. Things are happening. And so the ONI is going, here's something we can do, right? Let's set up a UAP task force. Okay, so they did that. They don't need funding for it. They just set it up. And then Rubio uses that as the target, as the target for some of the language. And so when he puts that language in the Defense Appropriations Bill, which was a big deal, he also announced and let the world know that there was a task force of the ONI. That was good for the ONI. So the ONI is looking good. And so essentially Rubio is politically safe, at least for now. And then they put a 180 deadline on it, guaranteeing that even if it had been signed 3 months ago, it was going to be next year. It was going to be after the election before this comes into play. Perfectly safe. But Marco Rubio has put himself on the train. He's got himself a seat on that train. Now, the bill wasn't signed until the end of the year. And so the deadline is now June 25. Mm-hmm. So at some point between now and June 25, a bunch of files, or maybe not, will come from some agencies to the Intel Committee. So that was in play, right? And so, and then, right, the CIA, right? I don't know if you remember, but Hillary did not win the election. And so disclosure wasn't going to happen. But the TTSA was in the works. The CIA knew it. And so what did the CIA do the day before the inauguration of President Trump? They released 930,000 documents relating to ETs and other interesting exotica within the CIA, so that people could. They had been available in the archives, but nobody goes there. They made them available online. A nice move on the part of CIA to help get on the train. Now the CIA is taking another move. The CIA essentially, in conjunction, the Black Vault, John Greenwald's extraordinary life project that is going to become world famous. Mm-hmm. They provided a DVD to him. He bought it. Had a bunch of files on there that weren't readily available. And so it's not as simple as people think. Just because files are out doesn't mean you can get them. But what's happening is not only they're out, but they're starting to become accessible. And so there's a whole bunch of new files that are being made accessible, much of which have come recently from the CIA through the Black Vault and John Greenwald. And that's not a big deal to me, but it's a big deal to the press. And so the articles are pouring out, and the CIA is looking good, isn't it? The CIA is getting itself a seat on that train, and it damn well needs to have a seat on that train.
Well, right. It's better to get a little ahead of it. Because secrets have been secrets for a long time, so might as well come out now, like you said. Whoa.
What do you mean might as well come out now? They didn't come out 20 years ago, 10 years ago, 8 years ago. Why are they coming out now? This moment. Because disclosure is imminent. All right,
let's hold it there. I'm gonna play this for you, Steve.
That's the interview? Okay.
Yeah, let's get your reaction. It's real short.
There are times where prying information out of the bowels of an agency can be challenging.
UFOs? Any UFOs? Did you ask about that?
Certainly asked about it.
And?
Can't tell you. Sorry.
Okay. All right, I'll take that as a yes. Because if there were none,
Why
you'd say
not?
there was none, right?
I have seen this.
You just played your hand. I thought you were a poker player. You just 100% showed your river card.
Feel free to think that.
I do. That's so much.
There,
that makes me happy to think that you won't tell me about
Can
UFOs.
I say it used to be that UFOs was the and what is it? Roswell was the biggest conspiracy,
Yeah.
and now that seems so tame, right?
Right.
The idea that
Right.
the government might have an alien spaceship.
So what do you think?
I love it and I hate it at the same time. Look, if you go back and look at the earlier one back in 2016, where Colbert, and by the way, Obama is the best at this. He is absolutely supreme at this. He was asked by Colbert the similar question, only it was a more detailed question. And the same question was asked of Hillary and Bill Clinton. That was all orchestrated, by the way. That was not random. That was all planned in advance. And he had this one remark. He said, well, can we learn about that now? Referring to the question, and Obama looks at him and smiles and goes, "They won't let me."
That one too.
And by they, he meant the ETs. So now,
my question to you, Steve, is that because all those Clinton people were in his administration, is it possible that Obama did get some kind of confirmation and simply didn't release it?
No, it's not a matter of confirmation. Obama, whatever the plans the Clintons had, he was brought into those plans. In other words, look. During the Obama administration, we didn't stop. I would have been more than happy for Obama to be the disclosure president. And I put as much pressure out there as I could. But it wasn't going to happen because his administration was very tough. It was a really tough time.
Okay.
The Republicans were absolutely savage in that administration. They took all the money. He had a financial crisis. He was the first black president, whatever. So it didn't happen, which, of course, was great for Hillary. But he was brought in, believe me. He knew what their plans were, and he knew whatever he wanted to know in terms of the public domain about the ET issue. But he wasn't going to talk about it. So when he was, so in the leading up to the campaign, when he finally goes on television, and he arranges to be asked that same question by Colbert that Kimmel had asked Hillary and Bill, that was basically to show the flag in a sense. It was like to put a little more gravitas behind the fact that Hillary wasn't just throwing this stuff out for the hell of it, that he was but he could only go so far. And that was their strategy. Podesta did not want to talk about this issue at all during that campaign. Okay. They had it locked. As far as he was concerned, any discussions about ET stuff was a risk to the campaign. And you don't take an unnecessary risk. Unfortunately, there was an activist movement that had been going on for a long time, and we were not going to let it slide. And so I did everything I could to force that issue in. And I am sure I am not talked about in favorable terms within those people. I accept that. That's the activist path. The point is that I forced them to talk about it. He didn't want to. Now, he may think that anything she said about the ETs cost of the election. Absolutely not. She did not lose a single vote over her statements about the ET issue. In fact, she got votes. Because at the core of the ET issue and the truth embargo is the fact that the United States government has been lying to the American people, not like with Vietnam where they told a few lies a few times, but every day of every week of every month for 70 years. And as in the last 12 years, the last 10 or 12 years in terms of American politics, one of the absolute core issues that has been driving politics in this country is that people are absolutely fed up with a government that lies to them all the time, particularly about major issues like war. All right? They're sick of it. And so consequently, she was speaking to that. When she's saying that, there's a lot of people out there saying, you mean you might tell us the truth about the ET issue? I'll vote for you. And I'm happy to say this, and I've sent him an email to this effect. If she had gone further, if she had given an extensive interview, if her husband had backed her up, if she had really brought that issue out, she would have been president of the United States. This is the karma. This is the cost of prevarication lives and misdirection. When Podesta went in front of the press club in 2002 and said the people have a right to know because they have the right to this truth because they have a right to know, and it's the law. He was right. And that was 2002. Well, 18 years have gone by, and he's even more right. And so she didn't do it. Now, what is Biden going to do? And this is the real important question. And my job over the next 2 months or so is clear. And you're going to see it unfold. And you're going to see it everywhere it can be. I'm going to be all over the place. I plan to do 100 interviews in the next 3 months easily. What's my job? It's simple. To create a situation where there's no way Biden can back out of this. There's no way they can say, look, there's so many things to deal with now. We have crises, we have COVID, we have this, we have that. We should just put this off a year or two. We'll get to it, The people don't need about ETs right now. It's not that big a deal. BS. All right? Here's what my message to President Biden is. It's very simple. If you wait to hold these hearings, the cost could be enormous. And by the way, there is a now convenient excuse to delay the hearings. And it's in play right now. It's getting a lot of press. Again, everything is getting a lot of press in this issue now because the level of expectation is growing every single week. What am I talking about? Well, it's that 180-day thing in the defense appropriations bill, article after article. In 180 days, we're going to get all this information. We're waiting on this. It's going to come from the government. They're going to give us all this stuff by June the 25th.
So what do you think the UAP task force is going to actually do besides just receive paperwork?
I don't care. I mean, the UAP is going to do what it does, and it's going to have what it has. The point is, what is the ONI going to give to the Senate Intelligence Committee between now and June 25? What's the Department of Defense going to provide? What are any of these agencies going to provide at the request of Rubio and the Defense? Well, it'll be Warner. He'll be the chairman of the Intelligence Committee. I don't know. But a lot of people are excited about it. And here's the problem. Somebody's going to raise their hand inside some committee in the Congress and go, we should let's wait and see what we get from the agencies that we requested about the phenomenon, about what they know and are doing or whatever. And then we can decide to have hearings.
Do we know, has Rubio ever had a UFO sighting?
No. He never said anything.
Okay.
And so here's the problem I have with that. The United States government has been withholding information for 70 years. It has lied, denied. It has blocked, it has stonewalled at least 3 presidents. It has not serviced FOIA requests. It's lost documents. They were lost in the mail. The phone documents were lost, et cetera, et cetera. They've been doing this for 70 years. So the idea that all of a sudden in June, between now and June 25, they're going to say, okay, boom, here you go. Not necessarily. It's possible that we're going to get from them a bunch of fluff, a bunch of small potato stuff that doesn't really mean much. In other words, somebody inside these agencies will ultimately go, we can't do it. We can't do it. If we give them this stuff, the truth will come out and the press will ask me difficult questions and my wife won't like me or something. I don't know. Well,
but, I mean,
that cannot be allowed to happen because then the hearings could be delayed indefinitely.
And that's what you're trying to prevent, basically.
Here's how you prevent it.
Yeah.
You hold the hearings right away. And here is how beautiful that is. Let's say early in March, we learned that hearings are being scheduled on the Hill for witnesses on the UAP issue. Christopher Mellon will undoubtedly be in the news about that. He'll be talking about it. And there'll be some committees that'll be mentioned. And I'm sure the Senate Intelligence Committee, it has earned and deserves the right to hold the first one. So they'll probably hold the first one. And off we go. Okay. And so we have some hearings, then we have some more hearings and more witnesses come up, and this thing is rolling. Millions of people are watching it from all over the world. What does that mean? The message will be sent to these agencies. Guys, no more fiddling around, no more procrastination, no more hide the muffin, okay? Dish it out. I'm not saying they're going to dump everything out. I'm simply saying produce a lot of substantive, consequential material, which will naturally some of you will be coming down on the Hill and testifying about it as part of these hearings. And that will just make the hearings that much more powerful. In other words, by holding these hearings, we give the agencies no choice but to deliver. If we do not hold them, we give them a chance to play the same game and delay this. And God knows what can happen this year that could put them off even further. So hold the hearings. The Congress wins. the congressional leaders wins, the president wins, the DOD wins. Those agencies are taken off the hook. The American people win because they finally get the truth on this, and the world's people win because they finally get the truth on this. It is win, 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 win. Now,
okay, for everybody listening, we're going to open up the phone line. So if you want to call in and ask Stephen your question, the number is 855-472-5483 for the Paranormal Radio app hotline, 855-472-5483 or 85-KGRA live. Go ahead, Steve.
So there it is. But I've been around long enough to know that never underestimate the ability of the Democrats to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. They've done it over and over and over again. They can't do it this time. I understand there's a pandemic. Oh, and by the way, let me throw something else out. Another reason to hold these hearings. The world has just gone through one of the worst years of its history since World War II. Since then, nothing compares to 2020. World War II, no comparison, it's tough. But even this is more global than World War II. It's an awful year in every way conceivable. And it's on top of all the problems the world had to begin with. There were plenty of people dying of starvation and without proper drinking water and healthcare and everything else before the pandemic. It has been hell on earth. We're the worst political divide we've ever seen. We've got all kinds of problems in this country. Nasty. It's going to take a while to solve them. And the President of the United States, assuming that he does in any way prevent what I think is potentially in the works, has an opportunity to lay out in front of the world something unbelievably profound that is not political. It is bipartisan. It is a paradigm shift, a worldview changing shift. He has a chance to put that in front of the world and give everybody something positive, exciting to look forward to. Besides the pandemic and all the other miseries they have, which they're still going to have, but they'll be able to have something to be excited about. When was the last time you have had something, Alan, to really be excited about that you would turn on the television and go, wow, I can't wait to learn more about this?
Well, I do follow SpaceX, so I find that exciting.
SpaceX?
But not quite at the level that you're speaking of.
Yeah, thank you. I'm glad you made that deferral. Look, the Apollo landing on the moon was in the space program back then. Yeah. That was it. But we haven't had it. He has a chance to do it. We need that. The world needs this. And there's something else. The president has an enormous task ahead, seemingly insolvable problems. In order to solve problems as a head of state, you need political capital. And he needs a lot of political capital.
And you think this will give it to him?
Being the disclosure president, being the head of state that finally confirms the extraterrestrial presence issue and is responsible for the bringing forward of important information about that, possibly even scientific information that could change our scientific paradigms. Yeah, that's and it's a nonpartisan political capital, right? It is as good as it gets. He can then use that goodwill and good capital in order to solve problems. I'm not a genius, but this is a no-brainer. This is a slam dunk, right? And if somebody invites me up the hill, I'll tell them face to face. They're not going to do that. So I'm going to tell them in 5,000 podcasts, you do this. You absolutely cannot let this opportunity to get disclosure out of the way and have those hearings March, April of this year before those files come down from the agencies. Do not do this. If you do, it will be a massive blunder.
So you think, okay, he says unify, and you're saying, I have the solution for you, hand it on a silver platter. This is how you do it.
I wouldn't put it that crassly. I'm saying that in order to unify people, you have there are various ways to do that, but it's not easy when you're talking 300 million people. But one way to bring people together is to give them something very powerful, very engaging, very important, creative, that they can all focus on.
Well, Reagan said it years ago.
What now?
Reagan said it years ago.
In his own way, meaning if they were a threat, we'd all come together. That's not what I'm talking about. And if they are a threat, we're screwed. So don't even make plans for the future. So this is exactly that. That's how you bring people together. There is no political bias here. There's no partisanship. The ETs could give a crap whether you're Democrat or Republican or Libertarian, what your religion is or anything else. Right? They are part of the cosmic reality. We're not alone in the universe and all that means. Now there may be political takes on it that vary, but the fundamental information is as bipartisan as discovering the proton, for crying out loud. But it's not. It's 10,000 times more important than discovering the proton. And so he has a chance to bring people together around that. And while they're together around that, possibly, they can start to move away from extreme left, extreme right thinking and focus more on the good of the country. But in addition to that, let me tell you, the Democrats, they need to do the idea they're going to come into power and persuade a bunch of people to think differently. That ain't going to happen. The other thing they have to do is they have to help people. They've got to come up with policies that really help people, and not just their people, all people, right? And if they do that and they actually improve their lives, they will very likely see them being a little bit more disposed to appreciating their point of view. But if they don't, if they play the same games that they've played in the past, and they really don't follow through with the policies we have to have, they just fall a little short because they don't quite have the energy, well, they're going to really need disclosure because everything else is going to go to hell.
We're going to get a question in from the chat. Thank you, Maria, for sharing this. This is from Neutron from KGRA chat room. Do you agree with the old adage that due to the dark history claimed, the only way we, the citizens, can get full disclosure of all, including related government crimes against humanity, is with full immunity and pardon if you come forward?
Oh, let's simplify that a little bit. I'm not in the my activism is not about all the crimes against humanity. That's a very long list, and I can't even contemplate it. I'm interested in one thing, and that's disclosure of the extraterrestrial presence. Now, it's possible that a successful disclosure that goes very, very well might open the door to engaging some other, quote, closeted matters that could best be resolved, and thus so we can move forward there. I don't know, but there's a lot of stuff in those closets, and I can't speak to that. But I will speak to another part of that question. In order for us to get as much information as possible, and we're not going to get it all as soon as possible, which will not be as soon as people want because the government's going to want to take its time. I fully support both a Truth and Reconciliation Commission and an Amnesty Commission. Now, what are they and what's the difference? An Amnesty Commission is, or rather an amnesty policy, is that if you, in the process of engaging this issue and you're working in government or working in government and you participate in that, you come forward with information. And somebody then jumps up and goes, wait a minute, that violates a law. You broke a law. You broke a NDA or whatever the hell. You will be given amnesty for that. You're not going to be punished for providing information on this issue that we absolutely have to learn about right now. In other words, it takes a lot of the pressure off people. They can speak more freely. Truth and Reconciliation is different. Truth and Reconciliation will refer to people, and most of them are dead, who were involved in the truth embargo, primarily the truth embargo, not the scientific research, but the truth embargo, who broke the law, who clearly broke laws in servicing that embargo, in service to the national security. I mean, it was the National Security Act that made all this possible. That doesn't mean that laws weren't broken in the process. And if somebody did break a law, even a serious law, in service to the embargo, and they come forward and explain all of that and associated information, they will be fully reconciled. Now, the other side of the Truth and Reconciliation process, as it has been practiced in the past, is if you don't come forward and it is eventually found out about this, then you might be subject to penalties and so forth. So Truth and Reconciliation will help bring some additional people out and, again, get the nation into the truth process. I think the COVID thing for the last year is more than anything brought forward the fact that America is starting to fall apart because we're no longer able to distinguish between truth and lies. And we've got people believing lies as truth and people believing truth as lies and calling truth lies. And this will disintegrate a society. And it just didn't happen under Trump. It's been going It's going all the way back to the Vietnam War, 1964. And this has been building for 60 years. We have got to get in the truth business as a country. It's got to become the default position. It's got to become a high goal that everyone aspires to, right? We've got to praise and reward people for telling the truth instead of praising and rewarding people who lie to us. Oh, he lied to us. Give him $100 million to run for election. What? Now, ending the truth embargo on this issue may be the beginning of taking the country in that direction. If we can finally tell the truth about the ET presence, what other things can we tell the truth about? And if we start getting the truth out on a lot of things, people will be going, I think maybe I can trust you now. What do you got for me? What's going on here? This sounds kind of simple-minded and Pollyannish, I understand. But
Steve, I've got a question from Christopher James. If we are in communication with aliens and they don't want disclosure, how does that play out?
There's no evidence that we're in formal communication with aliens. It's a speculation. And even if we were, I do not doubt that they oppose disclosure. Because if they had opposed disclosure, they wouldn't be acting the way they act. You may be aware that there's all kinds of new cloaking technology that's in research now. People have heard of stealth bombers and stealth ships, but they're even working on more advanced cloaking technology where you can't see it at all. That's inevitable. It's going to happen. Mm-hmm. You think ETs, which are hundreds or thousands of years ahead of us, don't have cloaking technology? You think that they can't fly a saucer through our skies and us not be able to see it? Really?
Which means they let us see them on occasion.
You got it. They let us see us.
Yeah.
If they don't want disclosure, why in the hell would they constantly be letting us see us on radar and infrared and in our binoculars? Unless they're really nasty, meaning, you can't disclose, but we're going to let you see us all the time, just to drive you crazy. And then there's the crop circles. Why do you go every year and put crop circles in the UK, mostly the UK, right? Every year, even knowing that every year more and more people show up with gliders and ultralights and night vision cameras, right? Even catching you in the act sometimes. Why do you do that? Just to tease us? I don't think so. And when you take a cow, right? They take animals for the blood mostly and probably some other tissues. I mean, this is pretty much established. They could drop it in the Pacific Ocean, right? They get the cow, they take the stuff, they drop it in the Pacific.
There's plenty of other things that they could do. Why do they?
And they drop it back in the damn ranch, and the farmer flies it the next day. I mean, I could go on and on and on. Not to mention the fact they've been in contact with humans and doing quote contact and abductive activities for a long time. And
that's why we call it an enigma, right?
And well, you can call it an enigma. I call it an agenda. They're and the memories are leaking out. They're not stopping that. They didn't come and get their wreckage back. So they are going about their business, and we don't fully know what that business is, though we have a few ideas. They're going about their business in a way that, one, they're able to do what they have to do, at the same time letting us know they're here, so that we can eventually come to the self-realization and then formally acknowledge as a civilization that they're here. And once we've done that, that's disclosure. I think open contact comes after that. Now,
Steve, at one time you had expressed to me that you thought the way it would have played out is Mike Pence would have ended up becoming president, right? That almost happened. That almost happened.
It was a possibility. I mean, it was a possibility. Right. I threw that out.
And you thought that would lead to another Clinton administration, if I'm correct.
Did I say that? That was very early on. Mm-hmm. No. Well, I mean, it could have happened if he had resigned. He could have resigned at any time, and then Pence would have become president. But
since that didn't happen, I mean, it almost kind of got close in a sense. So it did make me think of you, and I'm wondering what you're predicting now. Like, what if you're a betting man, right? What are the odds that this 2021 disclosure would occur?
At this point, 90%.
90%. Wow.
90%.
Okay. Do you have other people speaking to you and sharing things with you that help support this idea?
If one of the things that pleases me, if you go on social media, Twitter, Facebook, particularly if you have a lot of followers to get a big stream, or you just go in the groups, more and more the topic is shifting to disclosure, not UAPs. UAPs is old news. Lights in the sky. Who cares? So disclosure. You're seeing that hashtag. You're seeing it in labels, and you're going to see more and more of that. And so the discussion on disclosure will increase. I'm going to be doing a major media blitz. I'm going to try to get a bunch of articles out there. I'm going to see what I can do. I've done it before. I hope I can do it again. Mm-hmm. And it's all going to be about the hearings. So, and that's part of the podcast. But let's put it this way. I have a very substantial database of all the producers of all the news in this country. And I've been holding off contacting them because I don't really have something to present, but soon I will. And I'm going to do everything I can to get the idea of disclosure and these hearings in the works, in the press, soon, meaning February, March. And I think the journalists are receptive to it because journalists they pay a lot of attention to what's going on. I mean, they're really involved in our world.
Yeah, I
watch it all the time.
Yeah, they may not be speaking of it, but they're aware is what you're saying.
But I'm referring to the fact that I think nobody has experienced the suffering of this country and the world, and the awful politics of this country over the last 4 years than the journalists. I mean, they have just been drenched in it, and they are tired and they are worn out and sick of it all. And if they choose, they're going to have this to write about. Now, they're already writing about it. You know, I have a print media archive on my ParadigmResearchGroup.org website, which is chronicling all the important articles, not the fluff, but the important articles. It's got 11,000 plus articles linked now. You can go read them all if you want to. It's got 700 articles already linked regarding the TTSA and the subsequent reactions to it by the government. I've been following this about as closely as any human being on the planet because I don't have a life. This is all I got, okay? I got 2 TVs, I got cable, I got everything. I'm following it all. And that is why I say 90%. And I will be happy to back off that if something changes, but I don't see anything changing yet. Let me put it this way. If the Capitol Police, bless their hearts, and I hope people really come to understand this. At any time, the Capitol Police on the 6th of this month could have opened fire on that crowd and easily killed hundreds of them before probably being killed themselves. It would have been a massacre. It would have been a catastrophe. And instead, they chose not to do that. They did not do that. They did what they could. One of them died. Another had a heart attack and died later because they knew that it would only make things worse. And so they took the hit. Now, if that had happened, it would have been tough for me to see hearings happening in March, April this year, because the fallout from that would have been just god-awful. But it didn't happen.
All right, Steve, we're going to have to wrap it up here. We're right at the end. Thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it. Anybody who joined in late, we covered a wide scope of the history leading up to hopeful disclosure of 2021 with Steve. Thank you so much. So I put Steve's website in the comment section. So if you want to find out more, just jump in there. And Steve, where else would you like people to go besides Paradigm Research Group?
Well, the DisclosureWire is linked there, but the DisclosureWire.org, the introductory podcast is up there. It also has a YouTube channel, DisclosureWire YouTube channel. And it's also going to be linked to my Paradigm Research Group YouTube channel. And I do have a Twitter page, please, Paradigm Research Group. Please consider following it. I need all the followers I can get. I just lost about 800. I don't know why. They just disappeared.
Oh, yeah, I think we do. All right. Thanks, Steve. Have a good night. Right. Appreciate it. Thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight on Paranormal Now, live on KGRA, now on Sundays, 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And I'd like to thank our producer, Bill Skywatcher, Head of Operations, Eric Brager, and stay tuned for the Tracy Austin Show coming up in just a moment. And until next time, everyone, live in the mystery.